I am bringing on Ricardo Olvera Martinez. Hi, Ricardo.
Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm going to intro Ricardo real quick and pass the mic over to him so that he's able to share his story. But Ricardo, a DACA recipient, launched his career as a financial advisor. He later founded Central JA, supporting Hispanic businesses in digital transformation. Notable as a speaker at institutions like Maribel University and the Hispanic chapter of Chamber of St. Louis, he's now devoted full time to Juntos Adelante, a finance platform for Spanish speakers. Welcome, welcome to Ricardo.
Hello. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Ricardo, I'm going to step off stage and floor is all yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the introduction. So, growing up as the child of immigrants in the United States, right, you quickly realize you're living parallel lives. Right? There's the mainstream life, the kind you see on TV shows, where kids wake up, head to school, come home, play a bit, do homework, and then dream away until the next day. It's where vacations are annual rituals, and a home is where there is safety and not just a shelter. Then there is the other life that those of us who are immigrants or children of immigrants live, right? One where we grow up in a house where you have to look out the blinds every time there was a knock and hope that it wasn't immigration. Here, we aren't just kids, we're bridges between two different cultures. We create a safe space of what our parents remember while learning about a new culture entirely, ensuring our families don't lose their roots even as they plant themselves in American soil. A life where some of our parents may be known by different names on paper. Now, just imagine for a second, if you haven't lived through it yourself, being entrusted with your family's vital decisions when you're still figuring out long division at school. That's the story for a lot of us. Now, my story started out in a little town called Morton, Illinois, a close-knit community with an elementary school for about 350 students. I was one of two Hispanic kids in one of the most affluent school districts in central Illinois, which meant getting reminded day in and day out of the American dream. You know the one with white picket fence neighborhoods, and where home ownership was an expectation. Now, while going to elementary school, I remember that the secretary and principal became accustomed to my parents pulling me out of school to be a translator for insurance, buying a car, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, and much more. Now, a lot of us have had the same experiences where we have to learn topics like these very early to help our parents make informed decisions or to navigate the world around them. I remember being a 7-year-old and having to figure out what health insurance was to know how much a doctor's appointment was going to be for my parents. This situation can then be made worse when you live in the Midwest, since there are even less resources available for Spanish speakers. Now, one of the biggest incidents that encouraged my curiosity is when we got into a deer accident on the road driving a blue Chrysler Town and Country. And my parents thought it was going to be covered by insurance. Then upon them finding out that it wasn't going to be covered, I took it upon myself to learn how insurance worked at around the age of 10, trying to figure out the difference between liability and full coverage. Now, during that time, we got into 3 different deer accidents with the same blue van, but at least now 2 of them ended up being covered. It only cost us our deductible. Now, these experiences led me to learn more about the world around us, like how car payments worked and how credit worked. I knew my parents had that blue van and were making payments on it after getting it from a car dealership upstate. But why was it that no one would lend us money for a car where we lived? Why was it that the local dealership wouldn't lend us money for a car? Now, once I began to unravel that mystery, it turned out that it was because of credit. There needed to be a credit history built. So I let my parents know my new finding. Then after making payments for years, they could get a car locally. And they did. But during that time, I got to see them make the last payment on the blue van they got from the dealership upstate. And I also got a glimpse of the loan agreement and realized that they were paying $300 a month for a loan with a 23% interest rate for 5 years. That meant that they paid almost $10,000 in interest alone. Now, that incident led me to be even more active in their financial decisions, taking on the role of not just a translator, but as a negotiator for my parents. Through my high school years, I would learn more about the decisions being made by immigrants without the resources to help them make informed decisions. Right? Learning about tax preparers charging $500 for a consultation, learning about insurance agencies charging fees that range from $100 to $200 to even $1,000 on policy fees, or auto sales companies that don't tie your monthly payment to their credit and charge them upwards of 30% on interest without the possibility of ever refinancing. Now, I spent my time not only helping my parents, but then also families around us, acting as a community translator for finances. Now, don't get me wrong, I didn't feel like I was doing anything special at that time. On the contrary, I felt trapped. I felt like everyone was relying on me, and I felt like I wasn't allowed to do sports, clubs, activities, or anything else because I had responsibilities. Not only that, but I felt like I was watching kids around me live the life I thought I should have while having a very different life myself. Now, during all of that time, there were many similarities between myself and other people around me, right? I was just like any other teenager going through the awkward transitions, all the ones that you have to go through as you start learning who you are. Even though I had more responsibilities than my friends, I had started to accept them, and I was going through the motions and expecting the unexpected at that time. But the one moment that changed me entirely came the summer between freshman and sophomore year in high school, when my stepdad, whom I had grown up since I was 5, was diagnosed with brain cancer. Not only was this impactful in my life because of the circumstances, but I had to translate the whole diagnosis and let him know that he had 5 years left. This is where I knew these responsibilities should not be on the shoulders of children of immigrants. But even with all of that, the dual existence, as challenging as it was, paved the way for one of the most significant turning points in my life, getting DACA. My parents found someone in our community who spoke Spanish and can guide us through the process, and just like that, a door opened. A door that led me to opportunities I hadn't even thought of, like getting my first job, something that to my parents was a saving grace. For me to be able to do this legally and easily, it was something they wished for themselves and were happy to give me that opportunity. With that excitement, I got my first job. I started focusing on getting into college, and during this time, I made sure to do the right things, right? Volunteer, get straight A's, except for a long discussion that came from my parents after failing art, something I know my mom still won't let me forget. And then finally, I got accepted into college. Right? I was ready to attend, and as all my friends were, but then I found out that DACA recipients couldn't get any kind of federal assistance, federal loans, and we had limited scholarships. I had to start creating my own path. There was no one around me who knew what was needed to get into college during that time, since the program was only 5 years old. So I decided to do what my dad used to do, right? Go to door to seek employment. This led me to work at a beverage distribution center where I had to deliver beverages to institutions and then such as Western Illinois, right? And I remember watching groups of kids my age walk around smiling while laughing and joke about something someone just said. Again, living that mainstream American life, the one that we grew up being told by counselors and watching on TV. They were following the path I was told I should have been available to me. Then, while working at this job, I found out I was going to be a dad. Now that led me to work at a slaughterhouse and search for more pay and more hours. This was a company where I was able to start seeing the potential in myself. Every day I would wake up and do the same cut, right? Every day I would wake up at 5 a.m. and start my 1-hour commute. I would arrive and put on my cold metal sleeves and a sweater to keep me warm in the 40-degree refrigeration unit. I would start working a 10-hour shift, then head home. This is where my mom worked. This is where my dad worked. Then this is where my family's friends worked. But is this what I wanted? Slowly, I started to ask people around me how to do their jobs. I started learning different cuts, started learning how they were producing the revenues, how they managed their inventory, how they measured profitability, and how every second of the day was optimized and measured. I wanted to know how everything around me worked to contribute more. All of this led me to getting noticed by people upstairs and being asked to do some office work for them. Later, I would find out that the starting of a growth mindset. I was starting to build my own path. Then after working there for a year and a half, I suggested we move to St. Louis to my now wife to try to make a career. And she accepted a full-time job and we moved to St. Louis, where I was determined to be a financial advisor. This led me initially to a startup insurance agency, and this was the first job I was entrusted to work in an office. I was introduced to working behind a desk, CRMs, customer service, and cold calling, which let me tell you, 100 cold calls a day is not fun. But this introduction showed me that I have what it takes to start a business. The owner of the agency also introduced me to personal development books. This was revolutionary for me. From reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People to 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, right? 5, 10, 15, 20 books later, I started feeling more confident in myself. Confidence to talk to others, confidence to believe in my ideas, and the confidence of understanding how to be a professional and to connect the dots of what I thought I knew. Now, after finally getting recruited to be a financial advisor, I started to become more confident. I started understanding that the lack of confidence is almost always a lack of knowledge. And with a big thanks to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and in particular, someone named Gabriela Ramirez Arellano, who worked within the organization, I started getting more comfortable networking. While working as an advisor, I realized something strange though. Even though my goal when I signed up was to help the Hispanic community, there weren't a lot of them comfortable enough to start investing. And in a commission-based job like a financial advisor, you don't have a lot of time to inform the community from the ground up about personal finance. Now, this lit a spark in me to do something about it. And I started juntosadelante.com, right? A website focused on bridging that gap. That became a project I worked for months to build a website with calculators without knowing anything about tech. And while I was learning about JavaScript and how to build a website, I stumbled upon LaunchCode. They offered a free boot camp for motivated individuals to learn how to code through a 40-hour-a-week, 12-week course. So I resigned my job and focused on the course and got a third shift job to help pay the bills. Now, this is where my concept of growth mindset was challenged. That was a difficult time, right? My wife and I had a 3-year-old in daycare, and we had another little one on the way. She worked full-time, and I started to learn how to code while working a third shift job at a pharmaceutical distribution center. Now, the work was at times easy. However, the lack of sleep and the course materials were the difficult aspects. For someone who hadn't even considered coding, to be asked to learn how to code a single web page app in 12 weeks, it was hard work. And for all of you that know how to code, you know the pain. I remember every assignment and task we were assigned. I was challenged and questioned whether I was even smart enough to be doing this. I remember just typing away, hoping that something would click. And you know what? Eventually it would. The path there was filled with maybes. Don't do that. Does this even look right? Or how does this even work? But I did it. And with that knowledge, I decided to build Juntos Adelante. I decided to focus on building a web page that was everything I thought that was needed in the Spanish community when I was growing up. With time, I got asked to help other companies. And I had to start working on that web page to actually make money. So I started Central JA, a consulting company during the pandemic. We grew from just me to 4 people fast because of demand during COVID. And we were building web pages left and right and the digital marketing to support and increase traffic and sales. And this was a project like I definitely felt everything was starting to come together for the first time. It encompassed understanding of businesses and being able to build simple pieces of software or Excel sheets sometimes just to improve the processes and integrate digital inventory management and more digital tools. And it was during that process that I became more confident with what I have learned and the powers that came with having a growth mindset. Right? I went through the Google Project Management Certificate, the Data Analytics Google the Google Data Analytics Certificate, the Cloud Computing certifications, and just to learn more during this process. Throughout the stint of this company, we won the Hispanic Business Advocates of the Year for 2021 for that work helping small businesses during COVID. Now, when things slowed down, one of the employees took over and I went back to work on Juntos Adelante and implementing everything I had learned. I decided to restart my startup to help Spanish speakers in the US understand personal finance and make informed decisions by offering financial literacy courses, calculators, and budgeting worksheets, not only to help the parents, but to help the children of immigrants who deserve to be a kid and grow up without the weight of their families on their shoulder. Now, all of these successes and failures came from asking myself, why not ask more questions? Why not learn more? Why not allow myself to grow? And I think as DACA recipients, we're often forced to take different paths. We are often told that there is a path until we find out that that path is actually inaccessible to people like us. We don't have the privilege to take the easy route. But we must not forget, regardless of who you are or where you come from, there is always a path, even if you have to build it yourself stone by stone. The same way that we had to learn a different culture for our parents, that is the same way we have to allow ourselves to learn every day and keep growing. We owe it to our friends, our family, our grandparents, but most importantly, we owe it to ourselves. Thank you.
Hi, Ricardo. Thank you so much for that motivating and amazing inspirational story that you told. This was so amazing. And I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you. So, hi. We're really, really excited to have you here. And thank you so much. If there's anyone in the chat that has questions about Ricardo's story, about what he's currently doing, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. And I'm actually going to add Jolise back on here. I saw her come on. She could have more to say too. So,
Ricardo, again, I'm just so grateful for you sharing your story and really coloring for folks like how your experiences, and this kind of draws back to a conversation we were also having yesterday, how experiences you have growing up of just supporting your family, supporting your community really aligns with what your purpose is right now. And I just really hope that folks take away from that like all the experiences we have growing up in our communities, being the translators, being just trying to figure out, like, as you were talking about, healthcare, insurance, all those things, that prepares us in a very different way than a lot of other people in other communities. We are able to be the Jack and Jills and Jades of all trades because of it. So Ricardo, thank you so much for not just sharing your story, but like also sharing the impact that you continue to have with the work that you're doing.
No, thank you for allowing me to share. Because like you mentioned, I think a lot of us have that same background, and it's sometimes overwhelming, but I do think that with time, it definitely helps a little bit to just make you stronger, right? Just because you know that you had some experiences that your friends, even as you become an adult, still are trying to learn, right? And I think that a lot of times it can be overwhelming at the time, but it's definitely something that we all learn from.
What do you think that like young child Ricardo would be most surprised by your life today?
That's a good question. I think that just the fact that I've embraced a lot of it is definitely something, because I think that, and I can speak from my experience and from people around me, like when you are of that age, you definitely, it's so overwhelming at times that you just look forward to going to college, right? And just going somewhere else for a while and just letting yourself be yourself, right? And I think that I have definitely embraced a lot of the people around me and the different, a lot of those different aspects, which I think going back and then helping out is actually the path that I've decided to take. Is just that, right? Not to just go off and do something else, but to come back and help out everyone that I can. And I think that is definitely something that younger Ricardo would be most interested in.
I love that. And look, I know we only have about a minute left, so I do want to end a little bit with a fun note. Can you tell me about like what's bringing you joy these days? Maybe what you're binge watching, what you're listening to?
Oh, I have to say my little ones, like
Aw.
those two, they're two boys, and they get on each other's nerves sometimes, and they're hilarious. It's hilarious watching the little one now try to say and do everything older brother does, and it's like, who am I talking to now? Is it the older one, or is it the younger one? He just, all these little things he's saying, and it's like I told him this morning, I love you, and he said, I know, Dad, and I was like, what? That's that.
Oh, he not soloed you.
Yeah, no, they're both hilarious because like the older one, I told him the same thing. I was like, I love you, and he's like, I love myself too, Dad. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
I'm happy for you, but say it back, say it for sure.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your amazing story, your words. Folks, please connect with Ricardo. And we have so much more going on. I'm actually going to bring Alexis back up to the stage to tell us what we've got coming up. Oh, Alexis,
just little old me. Yep, just little old me on mute. Again, thank you so much, Ricardo, for all your words of wisdom and your story. We really, really appreciate you. I'm just going to remove you from the stage now, but if anyone has any questions for Ricardo, please feel free to reach out.